Prepare to be entertained. The sequel to the 2000s smashing Oscar success of Gladiator is getting a sequel by the legendary filmmaker Ridley Scott, who only serves the sequel rights to his Alien and I guess now the Gladiator franchise. Kevin, you got to see it yesterday. Me as well. And the early reviews are quite all over the place. And I don't know how you feel about it. I quite liked it. What did you think of it?
I quite liked it too.
Oh my god. Well, that's all our time, guys. No, but it's like basically follows some of the loose threads that were still kind of there in the first one with Lucius, a character that was already introduced. And me going in, I know the trailers don't really hide anything about like who Paul Mescal's character actually is. But the story then in the film kind of does. And then I'm like, okay, well, they spoiled it, but it was never intended to be a spoiler. But then why does it narratively frame it like that? That's one of my issues I got with the story. We also have Connie Nielsen, who returns as Lucilla. And then notably, the additions to the cast are Pedro Pascal as Marcus Acacius, the general. And then Denzel Washington as Macrinus. And then we have two brothers as the emperors, two little douchebags played by Joseph Quinn and Fred Hatchingham. Yeah, they're both deliciously horrible. This is a movie that definitely isn't historically accurate, and that's kind of the expectations that you have to go into it. And I feel like the first one wasn't either. There was a big thing online about like the historical accuracies of a certain rhino breed not being there around that time, or like the sharks in the Colosseum and all that stuff. And I feel like this is not the type of movie to be too concerned about that.
Like at a certain moment, there is a senator who is reading a newspaper, and like the print wasn't invented until like 1,400 years after the Gladiator 2 event. So how is he reading a paper? It's like, yeah, there's a lot of historical inaccuracy.
And if you want to have like a historically accurate picture, this is not it. And I think it gets really goofy at times. This is an action adventure film. At the core of it all, it is action. There's a whole bunch of drama, a bit of political intrigue, a bit of like thriller aspects, but it's not a historical film. Maybe just like it uses that time period as a setting more than it does like as a core story point, you know, to like get everything right.
If you tell Ridley Scott, hey, this isn't accurate, he'll basically say,
Q, thank you very much. Q, go yourself. Go on. So go on.
He like basically says to anyone that like, oh hey, I thought this was terrible or this was, he likes, who cares? It's a movie. Fuck you. Like that's basically his attitude towards reporters.
Yeah. Well, someone said it. Someone put it as like he feels like a 6-year-old directing movies, just whatever the fuck he wants, and just like, okay, there's in the Colosseum, you flood it and you put stuff in there, and he just has good fun with it.
I mean, no. Like they actually flooded arenas to recreate naval battles. Like that is accurate, but there weren't any sharks in it.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of stuff that's over the top, but I feel like the biggest draw that this movie has, and that is, I feel like the action, right? That's kind of what you go in for. It advertises itself featuring large battles, but then focusing on these gladiator battles that are mainly one-on-one. And as someone who appreciates a lot of action, I appreciated it in this as well. I think it was really strong. Ridley Scott is someone who's really strong with bigger battle scenes. But Kevin, what did you make of all of the action?
The action was absolutely solid. I will say, I think there's one thing that this movie misses from its predecessor, of course, the first Gladiator, which is my dad's favorite movie of all time. So, you know,
it is a very dad movie. Yeah.
Gladiator 2, I think, lacks the intimacy of the first one. Someone posted on Twitter, oh, nobody does it like this anymore. And it's a 2-minute scene of Oliver Reed talking about like what it is to be a Roman, or just the state of the world. And I felt like I was missing those moments of quiet, of peace in this movie. It's very quick, it's very fast. I was missing those moments for me. You know, Ridley Scott even talked about in like the career making of no, it's really Russell Crowe who says like, oh yeah, there was moments that like, oh, I want you to look at the bird in the sky and you follow it and then you'd redirect it to the battlefield. Like those moments for me felt like were missing in the second one. But he wants to make that up for scale. That's this movie. He wants to make that up for scale, which is totally fine for me, and I absolutely loved it. but it did make me miss the more quiet moments of the first one. That's why I think this one's is a bit inferior compared to the first one.
And one of the reasons I feel like that is so apparent is like the bigger changes in the performances to me as well. And his directing is that in the last couple of years, I don't know if he's always been like this, but to kind of give a bit more free reign in the actor bringing something for the character and just kind of accepting that. I feel like from what I've heard from interviews, Ridley Scott is not really pushing back on that. So you get those really over the top performances like a Lady Gaga in A House of Gucci or stuff like that then doesn't really work for the film. I think in something like The Last Duel, it actually kind of works perfectly in what the movie is all about, right? It is about these different perspectives, so it kind of makes sense that they shifted towards whose perspective you're in. Here, I think one of the points that I had from watching the trailer, I think that Paul Mescal, and I got to see back in August, I got to see the opening scene, the opening battle. I got to see that back in August as a bit of an industry event there. And yeah, I'm sorry, flex not to see the whole film, and I couldn't talk about it. But to me, there, I was unsure about Paul Mescal because his projected voice just was so out of place to me for that scene. And I think over the course of the film, it kind of grew on me, and he got into that role a bit better, but he still is a less exciting part of the film. Like, his character is not that interesting to me. And what I've seen a lot of people point out, and I don't necessarily fully disagree, but I also don't agree fully, is that he somehow doesn't bring that movie star charisma to this film, especially being in opposition to Pedro Pascal and Denzel Washington. And then Denzel putting on a bit of a larger performance at times. To me, the part that Denzel didn't work for me at times. There's a couple of scenes that it really I would say more to the fault of, I guess, the writing and direction, how it was put together. But some scenes with Denzel just like did not work at all for me.
Damn.
But what do you think about like the performances and the characters we get in this?
Obviously, I know there are a lot of Paul Mescal heads out there, but I think
including me, man.
But I think we have to remember this is his first actual big budget production. Paul Mescal on an acting level it isn't as big as a Chalamet or a Tom Holland, right? He has acted in Normal People, Oliver Strangers, After Sun. Those are not movies like Beautiful Boy or Cherry. I don't know, but yeah.
Tom Holland feels like a bad example because I wouldn't say he's great.
You understand what I mean, hopefully.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
He hadn't had this much experience in this, so I cut him some slack on that front, because I think for the rest of it, he did an impeccable job. Sure, Russell Crowe came before him, and Russell Crowe won the goddamn Oscar for it, so if you have that kind of expectation...
And Paul Mescal won't,
If you have that expectations of Paul Mescal, no, I don't think those will be met. But I thought Denzel Washington was
It's also not the type
great.
of movie that gives him the opportunity to give an Oscar-worthy performance. Like, I truly don't think anyone in this film is Oscar-worthy. Not by the...
Well, Oscar-worthy or Oscar nomination-worthy?
Both.
Oh.
I don't think anyone in this film is that good that it should
I don't know. I kind of like Denzel
result
Washington.
In an Oscar.
I kind of like him in those robes, doing his Denzel Washington laugh and smirks, and I personally loved it. I said to my dad, I know Denzel Washington performance in this movie is kind of to lick your fingers with it. It's just it's so greasy and sleazy. So that's why I loved his performance personally.
I mean, he clearly wants to make him the most interesting character, and he ends up being that by we won't be talking spoilers about it here. For that, you'll have to check out the podcast. But it like his character is the most intriguing in what the revelations are. When for Lucius, we introduced to him and for most of the film he's Hano, and then for the rest of it he turns into Lucius, right? Like that part of it wasn't really a reveal to me, and I don't really see that sentiment be reflected in those early reviews so far at all. Is that Pedro Pascal was actually, to me, the most compelling character who has to make a couple of decisions, when that's another thing that wasn't really spoiled in the trailers on like what his character is like, and I actually really, really enjoyed it, and was then a bit let down that we don't get as much of it. And I know there's a cut out there that I don't know how finished that is, like 3 hours and 40 minutes, I think. So maybe we will get a director's cut for this one as well at some point, because I think at moments it does feel a bit rushed, a bit incomplete, especially towards the finale. I think we rush a couple of points to just a few paces too fast. But yeah, sorry, you wanted to say something. I saw you. What do you want to say, Kev?
Well, I think I was also gonna mention Pedro Pascal's character, because he isn't the also he. But again, that's also a bit of Game of Thrones. The guy just looks Roman, with that hairstyle and with the gray.
Yeah.
So he's great.
He works perfectly for that.
But yeah, and at this moment, it kind of feels like it's a staple of Ridley Scott to bring out these not undercut but shorter versions of his movies, and later bring an actual director. Like, it's become the guy's staple. Blade Runner, Napoleon. I don't know if there's a House of Gucci.
I mean, Kingdom of Heaven.
Yeah,
right?
I mean,
no, it is.
Who knows, right? So it's become a bit of a staple to it. I will say my dad didn't watch any of the trailers, so he didn't even know about the Lucius stuff until in the actual middle of the movie. So there will be people that don't know and now know because we've told them. But sorry, if that's the case.
I also couldn't help but feel like when it is still playing it as it like we don't really know what's going on in Lucius for a large chunk of the film, and I think that's some of the struggles that people are having with Paul Mescal's performance that have less to do with his performance but with the writing for his character. Right. It ends up being so much easier to have all of his pain and rage be handled internally, when the Russell Crowe one was way more forward with, like, he felt like having his mind on his lips and just basically giving you what he's thinking. It was a bit easier to read. I still feel like a bunch of the stuff is attributed to the I think this is blockbuster wise, and for a pretty good blockbuster, one of the weakest editings I've seen in a bit. I think this movie is cut pretty badly.
I don't think so, but
no, I think the pacing at parts and the choices and some of the action to me is like very overcut. I think just in the editing.
I saw you even hating on the cinematography, which I didn't even think was bad. I kind of loved the color grading at certain points.
I mean, cinematography goes into play of how many like different shots we are getting, and it often feels like it's just exciting to have a camera there. And what's the budget of this film? Isn't it like something crazy, like 300 million? That is crazy. And like it feels great to use as much of these, because you can do all of the practical camera angles if you have all of the practical set around you. And I think that's where a large chunk of this money goes to the 20,000 plus extras and building all of these sets. It's so impressive, that part of it, and I think it's not lost on me. But then, it just feels choppy. So
you also have to call out Ridley Scott's way of shooting, then, because he's always like, I've always got these 6 camera setup. I remember one of those. So he always has a plethora of footage to go through. So I think that's also where maybe you're kind of pointing to him towards, because he just has a lot of options, and he kind of perhaps wants to use all the options of the footage. And it
feels like that in his direction with the actors as well, where it feels like they have different options for their characters. I don't know how consistent they play it from scene to scene. I think like there were a bunch of jumps that were made for Macronus, Denzel Washington's character, and especially for the 2 Emperor characters.
I was going to ask, what do you think of the Emperors? Because I thought Joseph Quinn did a good job, personally, for me, but Fred Heschinger was for me the lesser one, and I think that is because Barry Keoghan was supposed to be that character, I believe, but had to pull out.
I was wondering.
I think while you while you can say this guy was the weaker part of it, it might be because he was underprepared for it. I don't know what he has done before. Actually, let me take a quick look.
He's I think he's decent. It's just that I can picture Barry do that type of stuff with like the craziness in his eyes, and I've seen Fred do other stuff that he does overact it a bit. Usually, that's kind of his style, and I know Barry can kind of do that a bit more like held
Yeah.
down, and it still works. And I think for him, it wouldn't have worked if it were dialed down as much for Barry. So it's like there's a slight mismatch there. But yeah, Joseph Quinn is great. I mean, people are loving him since Stranger Things, and deservedly so. And I think
Quiet
here
Place Day
he,
One, I thought he was great in that one as well.
and then we'll see him next next year in the Fantastic Four: The First Steps. So he's on the rise.
Absolutely.
And I think he delivers here again for what is asked of him. I feel like that's always important to not just judge a performance on what you're getting, but also what was asked of them and what was given to them in the writing. And to me, that part of it is a bit all over the place. I think the writing is one of the weaker aspects once again. It's like similar to this is the same writer that did Napoleon, and the same kind of similar shortcomings of just, I don't know, something about it just like doesn't fully click
I do
to me.
wonder, this movie was shut down. I don't remember. Was it just because of COVID, or was it because of the strikes? I'm not 100% sure, but I know the movie had at a certain point did have a shutdown.
Probably the strikes.
Probably the strikes, which again could be the reason why some of the some aspects of the movie are a bit lesser written than others. So we'll never know, obviously. But
yeah.
Overall,
yeah.
I don't think it harms the first one. So
No.
I liked it quite a bit. So I do love some of the scale ups the movie does in after the first one, but I do lack the intimacy once again of the first one. I gave it a 7 out of 10.
Yeah, it was somewhere between a 6 and a 7, a 6.5. I don't really like thinking about the score while I'm in the movie, but I couldn't help but say like these are great points. Like this would be upwards towards an 8 and 9 out of 10. This action is like, and there's something emotional that really grabs me. I'm getting goosebumps, and then there's a weird, goofy scene that doesn't click for me. It's like, is this a 2 or a 5? A 2 or a 2.5 out of 5? It's just like it went up and down, and how I saw moments play out, and all that together kind of came as a 6.5 out of 10 to me. But I think for anyone who wants good action and like the first one, this is one that you should go see on the big screen.
I will say there's one part of me that was kind of concerned because the Gladiator 2 has had a very long production with very many versions of the sequel, because I remember at one point Russell Crowe's character was gonna come back from the afterlife, and I think it would have gone in a kind of like Titans way, like the Rat of the Titans sort of direction, which I was actually concerned it was going in that direction when Paul Mescal's character is experiencing some level of afterlife. He went there and touched upon it, but didn't go too far in it. I think that is also very commendable, because I know he can go very, very out of place in this movie. So I will commend Ridley Scott for that sort of restraint.
But we'll talk about it a bit more, actually a lot more in this week's podcast. So go check that one out. Kevin won't be joining us on that, but we'll talk full-on spoilers for everything, for the ending and all of those, I guess, over-the-top scenes. But glad to have had you on here, Kev. And let us know what you thought of the film. And where it ranks among the Ridley Scott filmography. For me, it's somewhere in the middle there. And yeah, we'll see you soon.